What you and your dog have in common. I'm Andrea Schneider, health and fitness expert, and I'm here today with Dr. Harris. Dr. Harris, will you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Dr. Lee Harris. I've been in private practice for over 40 years, and my interest is in making the quality of life better for dogs through lifestyle changes.
Right, and so Dr. Harris and I met a few weeks ago when my naughty husky ate some chocolate cake, and I brought her in because he was visiting, he was relieving my vet as they were on vacation, and we then wound up having a very nice conversation and realized we had a lot of things in common of our thoughts of people's health and animal health, and he was so kind and gave me a copy of his book, The Good Life for Dogs, which I would highly recommend, and I was really fascinated. I wasn't sure what to expect when I started reading it. I was, am I going to want to read a book on dogs, although I have 2 dogs. And it really struck me as like I was reading about humans. It wasn't necessarily I was thinking about dogs. So give us a little bit more about your thoughts and health and, for dogs and humans, Dr. Harris.
Well, when I first started practice over 40 years ago, we were doing the big things. We were repairing hit by car dogs. We were dealing with the major diseases like parvovirus and so forth. But what's happened is we've largely controlled those things. And so then it becomes a matter of really lifestyle and what makes them better. And a lot of that stuff isn't always covered by veterinarians. In other words, you can't really charge for, exercise advice or those types of things, or stress reduction. But those things are really where it's at. And just as in people, where over half of all the healthcare costs now are involved with diseases and conditions that lifestyle would help, we really can't afford the medical costs of lifestyle problems. And that's certainly true in dogs, where if we could eliminate, do all the healthy things, the right diet, the right exercise, all the other little things, it would make veterinary care more affordable because we wouldn't have to be fighting some of the chronic diseases that we do.
Right. So kind of really just like for humans, we should be more proactive in our health and be doing consistent good behavior for humans. And so kind of same thought process for our dogs and animals?
Absolutely. And I see it every day. Every day I'll see a dog where it's fighting problems that are directly related to just how its life is at home. And I'll also see dogs that are in marvelous shape, and I admire how great they are at their age, and they're active and they're smart. And I always ask those people, what do you do? Because people have a lot to teach me. And so I've learned a lot of things just from what people tell me that they do with their dogs that is working, and I can kind of tell for myself what isn't working.
So if you had to give us a couple pointers of what was working with these dogs who are in such good shape, mentally and physically, what would a couple pointers be?
The number one thing is also the hardest thing, and that is exercise. The right kinds of exercise, the right amount of exercise. And the reality is we can never give them enough exercise. These guys are descended from wolves that traveled 50 miles a day. And we're just not going to take them on their walk around the block and have all the benefits that we should get from exercise. But still, it's worth making an effort, because that's one of the big things that seems to make the difference between the dog that's aging gracefully and feels great and the dog is not. I think certainly hormone balance in middle age, which is related to a whole lot of other things, which may be diet, maybe toxins in the environment, that kind of a thing. That's probably a big thing that has to do with how they age and how they feel even in middle age. And then, of course, weight control. Weight control, we realize now that weight isn't just about carrying around extra pounds. It's about body fat having all these chemicals that it releases that cause inflammation and cause all sorts of other problems. It's also a hard battle to fight. It's just difficult, but it pays off when we can do it.
And I can't believe when you're talking that, it sounds like exactly like what I would be thinking or saying about humans. So that's just so interesting. And I know maybe, some people still aren't on this page about their own body or what they need to be doing, of the exercise and the sleeping right and balancing our hormones and all those things. So hopefully we're doing these with our animals, but we're doing them with ourselves, and it's our best friend. So why not maybe some of it do together, right?
Right.
And I was thinking my own dog, the dog you met, the husky, Rosie, she's only almost 2, and especially this time of year, it's so hot, she's kind of lethargic. And for a while I was running her at the lake, like the most I took her was 2 miles, and she was still a little bit of a puppy, and I didn't want to take her too much. But now I just take her, and I'm not always consistent. I try to take her every day and kind of just down the block, run back and forth. And I realize that's not enough. And that the less I'm doing with her, the more she's becoming lethargic, just like a human would be. So sometimes we have to push ourselves or our dogs a little bit out of the comfort zone and do a little bit more as opposed to less. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. I get people all the time when I ask them about their dog's activity, they say he has a big yard and he runs around the yard. Not the same thing. You know, my daughter's an exercise physiologist. She tells me all the time, you got to get that heart rate up for a good 20 minutes to reap any of the benefits that we get from exercise, and probably a lot more than that. It's hard to do, but don't pretend we're giving them exercise when they're not. Walking, of course, for people and for dogs, there's a tremendous amount of evidence that says that's our best way to health. But we probably need to put a little bit more into it. In other words, we need to say, okay, we're going to walk for 30 minutes or 40 minutes at a good brisk pace. Just wandering them around and letting them sniff the everybody's yard is not getting the heart rate up and getting the benefits.
Mm-hmm. What about taking them to a dog park and just letting them run with other dogs?
I'm ambivalent about that. I think realistically, if we measured the things we can measure about the effects of exercise, we probably would find that it's not a very good form of exercise because they run back and forth madly for a couple of minutes and then they sniff and wander around. They're really not keeping it going. You also have the risks at dog parks of aggressive dogs at some parks, and especially the viral diseases, the intestinal viruses that just seem to be so common in dogs that visit the dog park. Some people have great success with it, but usually I'd like to get them out doing something else.
So take them on the leash, go for a brisk walk, or if you run, then take them for a jog, a run, something like that.
I would say that's the ideal.
Okay. And so then you mentioned stress. So like I really never thought about my dogs having stress other than they're not happy like when we go out. And it seems like when one person in the family is gone, they tend to wait at the front door, or I see them, they've figured out how to break my blinds a little bit and stick their noses in my front window and be watching for who's coming home. So I know they're a little stressed, but they don't seem, I never really thought about it as stress. So tell us more what you're thinking about dogs with stress.
From my perspective, I'm always thinking about what is happening physically within the body as far as stress hormones and so forth. And we've learned a lot by looking at, you can do things like measure cortisol levels in the saliva when they're doing different things and see what stresses them. And in doing so, we learn a couple things. One is short-term stress is actually good for us. If you're stressed for half an hour, then that's fine. The bad effects of stress happen from dealing with it for days and weeks on end, because that's not what those stress hormones were intended for. They're not supposed to be up for 2 weeks, or you're going to have all kinds of problems. Certainly when I see dogs with skin infections, diarrhea, a variety of those things, very frequently it may be triggered by stress. The other thing about that is that even in people, self-reported stress, in other words, saying, boy, I feel overwhelmed and stressed, doesn't actually correlate very well with your stress hormones or your stress-induced diseases like fibromyalgia. So we need to realize that stress is really just our body's response to change, and little is good and too much is not so good.
And I totally agree with that, because I think people handle stress in different ways. And so some people, like I once had a client who worked at a 7-Eleven. He told me how stressful his job was, and I couldn't imagine how that could be. But then he also told me how he worked the night shift, and he had once got robbed during the night shift. So of course that would cause stress. So I think we all have stress, you're exactly right. And then it's how we cope with it, how we handle it, how long it goes on for, and then how we maybe let it affect us. And if we're learning skills that could help decrease our stress even better. So whether a person or an animal, would you agree?
Absolutely. And Andrea, how are your feelings on meditation? Do you work with clients on that?
Yeah. In fact,
I wish I could figure out some way to get my dogs to meditate, because I really think it would be a good thing. And I'm not sure how to transfer that over. There must be something we can do to reach that same stage of stress reduction. I haven't figured it out yet.
Well, see, I look at my dogs and they seem so peaceful most of the time that I almost feel like they are in a state of meditation, or I almost wish I were them sometimes, that they seem so relaxed and just laying there so peaceful and so calm that I think, gosh, they don't really seem like they have many cares in the world, or their biggest concern is, is my mom going to come home because she's been gone for 20 minutes or whatever the case may be, that they seem, and maybe not all dogs are that zen, and mine certainly have their moments when they're not, but sometimes they're just so peaceful.
And I think that can be true. I think that living in the moment is supposed to be what dogs are all about. But I see so many dogs with anxiety problems that it's clear that they don't always live in some pleasant zen moment, and that things, even when they're laying there peacefully, they may be listening to sounds in the neighborhood, smells. They're monitoring stuff that if they could speak, they might say, I'm a little worried about what's happening with that new German Shepherd 2 doors down, and all the things they're hearing. I get a lot of dogs where sounds that we don't hear in the house create anxiety, because a lot of things that are engineered to be quiet, like clock radios, actually make high-pitched sounds that we can't hear. And I suspect if we were subjected to those sounds all the time, we would probably get on our nerves.
Yeah, that is true. And I really liked your book when you talked about some of the different dogs, and like your dog when you were growing up, Misty. I could relate to Misty because I had a dog that we unfortunately had to put down a couple of years ago, but she had reached the point where she was already pretty much blind. I think she was pretty much deaf. We really wondered, like Misty, your dog, ours was named Maddie, how she roamed around the house and didn't seem to bang into things. And I kind of thought at the time that it was because she knew this house so well because she had grown up here from a puppy. But then you talked about the sound and, a little bit of the smell. They're using smell, but the clicking on the wood, and we have wood floors. So I, really could understand what you were saying on that. And I thought that was really, I never really thought about what they're smelling, smelling, but how they're relying on their senses so much like that.
And when we try to understand what might be stressful, we just have to think that they live in a different sensory world than we do. And they have things to be worried about that we don't even know about. They must think we're stupid.
That's probably true. So is the goal for them to be more like us, or us to be more like them, or we just do our own things?
I think the best thing is to try to understand a little bit of their world. I think in dogs, there's a lot of crossover where we can say the things that are meaningful to us, that make us feel good, that kind of thing, are probably very similar to the things that dogs experience. And so I think we can use that to help guide us as how to make them just subjectively experience life as being better. So
they would want love and companionship, and like humans do, and
yes,
the contact and the connection. So that would be something that would make them happy, right?
And there are people still who say, well, the dog isn't conscious of it. You can't say that they love me in that sense and so forth. But now that we know that the role of certain hormones like oxytocin in the feeling of love, when we say we feel love toward another person, our oxytocin level goes up. We pet the dog's oxytocin level goes up, and our oxytocin level goes up. And that creates some of that experience, some of that bond. So it's entirely accurate to say that when they're experiencing love, they're feeling the same thing as we are.
And I would totally agree with that, especially my little dog that you didn't meet, my little Bella Shih Tzu poodle. I mean, I really get this, when I touch her, I really get this sense and feeling of love, like from her, and that I'm giving to her. And I like to almost think of her as like a healer. I mean, she just like gives me such good feelings, especially like if I'm feeling stressed in my day, or I wake up sometimes in the night and I can't sleep. And there's my little companion who will follow me around the house and move around with me. And poor little thing's then tired the next day, but she's my loyal little friend. And when I pet her and touch her, I'm feeling more relaxed. And I'm hoping she's feeling that love too.
Well, they've done a lot of work on that in the last 10 years with pet therapy and so forth. And we know that, for instance, we pet the dog, our blood pressure goes down. And right there, I mean, and we know that people live longer. The studies they did where they assigned people coming out of the hospital after a cardiac event, they either gave them a plant or they gave them a pet to take care of. The people with the pet live twice as long after that. So there are definitely, subjectively, they're doing things for us. Even the things we can measure, like their hormones and blood pressure, are certainly benefiting both of us.
Right. And really, again, I'd highly recommend Dr. Harris's book, The Good Life for Dogs, because you will get a lot out of it. And so actually, I'm going to go back and try and use some of your pointers on how to train that naughty husky Rosie who gets into trouble all the time. And, so I like the comments you made about that. And really, you've done a lot of research, and I respect that because I know what it takes to write a book, because I wrote my own on breast cancer, and it took me 4 years and a lot of research. And so I realized you did a lot of research. And so I want to thank you for sharing that with people, because it's not something that we always think about or know about, and you've put it out there and put it into words, and I think you did an excellent job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, okay, so you could reach Dr. Lee or myself. I'm not sure if you're going to see my little post-it here on the side, so I'm going to tell you how you can reach me. Again, I'm Andrea Schneider, and you can find me at www.mybestme.us. And Dr. Harris, how are we going to find you?
You can find me at our website, goodlifefordogs.com. And that's usually the best way to get a hold of me. They're also on Facebook at Good Life for Dogs.
Right, and I'm also on Facebook, and so mine is mybestme.us, and Facebook as well. And then if you are a person with breast cancer, you might want to find my book. So that's called You Are Not Alone, Life After a Breast Cancer Diagnosis. So thank you so much for spending this time with me, Dr. Harris, and I hope we've given our viewers some good pointers and things to think about, and think about how they're like their dogs, how they're not like their dogs, and what they could be doing to make their lives happier, healthier for themselves and for their animals.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Pleasure talking.
Yes. Bye for now.
Thank you.